During my honeymoon with my husband, I woke up in the middle of the night and overheard him talking on the phone with someone about something terrifying. Despite my fear, I peeked at my husband's smartphone to find out what he was talking about. What I saw written there was unbelievable. After learning about my husband's plan, I took his passport and returned home alone. When I was preparing to crush my husband thoroughly, someone suddenly spoke to me. My name is Caroline. I am an ordinary office worker working for a company in New York. I met my husband Miles through a friend's introduction, went out to eat several times, and after a year of dating, we got married recently. My husband is good-looking and has a very kind personality, but there was only one drawback. This happened one day before our wedding. I'm home. Usually, my husband comes home late from work, but this day I came home late because of my long overtime. When I entered the entrance, I noticed something strange. I thought it was cheating, so I listened carefully and heard voices. It was a male and female voice, and I immediately recognized the male voice as Miles. I couldn't hear the content of the conversation, but I could hear the woman's voice. They seemed to be talking happily together. I immediately started recording with my smartphone and rushed into the living room. Miles and my mother-in-law were there. Oh, welcome back. Welcome back, Caroline. Sorry for intruding. I was relieved to find out that it wasn't cheating, but there was a strange sight in the living room. Cardboard boxes were piled up all over the room. I couldn't understand the situation very well, so I asked, what are these cardboard boxes? Miles replied, oh, these? I'm moving, so I was packing my things. My mother came to help me. I'm so confused that my head is about to explode. Moving? Where are we moving to? I didn't hear anything about it. Oh, Miles. Didn't you tell Caroline? Oh, sorry. I've been busy with work. I'm sorry, Caroline. Miles didn't tell you to live in my house if you get married. My in-laws' house? I'm even more confused. I thought after my honeymoon, I could spend time with my beloved husband alone, but this is terrible. I have to stop it somehow. I thought so and said, I didn't hear anything about it at all. I'm in trouble if you decide on your own. However, my mother-in-law said, oh dear, it's normal for a bride to live with her husband's family after getting married. If you can't do that, you'll have to break up with your son. That's what my mother said. Besides, I can live in my familiar home and it would be helpful for Caroline if something happened while living together, right? I was told that, and since my mother-in-law was there, I couldn't strongly say anything to my husband and decided to move to my in-laws' house. In this way, my husband is a mama's boy. Looking back now, if I had refused firmly at this time, it might not have happened like that. Living with my in-laws was very difficult for me. After I started living with my in-laws, my husband's mama's boy accelerated even more. No matter what I asked him to do, his first words were always Mom, and although my mother-in-law did most of the cooking and housework, sometimes I cooked, too. My mother's cooking is better, he said. My mother-in-law is happy to rely on her own son for everything, so she does everything for him. My father-in-law doesn't say anything and ignores me by avoiding me. I kept thinking that I had no meaning in this house. My biggest worry was my mother-in-law's extravagance. After I started living with my in-laws, I found out that my mother-in-law loves brand name clothes and bags, and she always buys them when her favorite brand's new products come out. Every time a new product came out, she said, Caroline, I want this, but I don't have that much money now. Can you give me a little? I thought that if she doesn't have enough money, don't buy it, but since my mother-in-law did most of the cooking and housework, I couldn't argue and had no choice but to pay as she said. Thanks to that, the savings I had been saving since my student days were running out. Even if I consulted with my husband about this, Miles said, don't complain because you're living here. I'm not living in this house because I like it. Even so, I didn't run away from this house because my husband cherished me in one way or another. When our holidays matched, he took me on a date, and he also planned a honeymoon trip. Living with my in-laws was tough, but I did my best relying only on my husband's kindness. And finally, the day of the honeymoon trip that my husband planned for me arrived. The destination was Italy. He fulfilled my long-cherished wish of, I want to eat authentic Italian food. I was very excited because my long-cherished dream was coming true, and I could travel abroad with my favorite person. However, the honeymoon trip I was looking forward to turned into a hellish trip with a single word from my husband. It was in the middle of the night. I woke up because I wanted to go to the bathroom and noticed that my husband wasn't next to me. I thought he might have gone to the bathroom, so I approached that side and heard my husband's voice. It seemed like he was talking to someone on the phone, but who could he be talking to at this time? I listened carefully and heard an unbelievable word. My wife's life will be over tomorrow. What? Don't worry, Mom. I'll do it well. I'll contact you again. The person on the phone seemed to be his mother. But my life is going to be over. I was trembling with fear, but I thought that if I stayed here like this, it would be revealed that I was listening, so I hurriedly returned to bed and pretended to sleep. After a while, my husband came back to bed and started snoring. I confirmed that my husband had fallen asleep and secretly left the bed and headed to the bathroom with my husband's smartphone. My husband is a person who doesn't lock his smartphone, so I was able to open it smoothly. Even though the other person was my husband, I knew that it was not a good thing to peek at someone's smartphone, but I had no choice but to look at it when I thought that my life might be in danger. I opened the message app on my husband's smartphone and saw the exchange with my mother-in-law. There, the contents of a terrible plan to kill me for insurance money were written. There was also a message that the insurance money obtained by killing me would be used by my mother-in-law for brand name products. It was nothing but fear. Although my husband originally was a mama's boy, I couldn't believe that my husband, who had been so kind to me, had planned such a thing with my mother-in-law. I took a picture of the exchange between my husband and mother-in-law with my smartphone and returned to bed. I couldn't sleep at all because I was so scared. Finally, it became bright outside and it was time for transportation to start moving. I thought that I was in danger if I stayed here, so I decided to leave the hotel alone with only my luggage. Just before leaving the room, I found my husband's passport on the desk. I came up with a good idea. I left the room with my husband's passport to lock him up overseas. Then I headed to the airport and returned to the United States on a plane. During that time, my husband called me countless times, but I ignored them all. After returning to the United States, I began to prepare for revenge against my husband and mother-in-law. I can't go home because I live with my in-laws. So I used a relatively cheap hotel in New York as a base to gather more evidence and contact lawyers. Then I went to the house and moved my luggage out little by little, taking advantage of the time when my in-laws were not there. During that time, my husband continued to contact me, but I continued to ignore him. One day, after living such a life for several days, I came to my in-laws' house to pick up my luggage. On this day, my mother-in-law was attending a knitting class and my father-in-law was playing golf as a hobby. Even if I roughly estimated it, they wouldn't be back for at least 2 hours. I thought it was safe and was packing my luggage when my father-in-law said, "Huh? Caroline?" A voice came from behind, so I turned around and there was my father-in-law. This is bad. My husband and I were supposed to be on our honeymoon in Italy until today. What are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon until today? What should I do? What excuse should I make? Should I honestly tell him why I came back to the United States alone? But what if my father-in-law was also involved in the plan my husband had made? Thoughts on what to do were swirling around in my head. My father-in-law said to me, who was confused, "It's not good here, so let's go to a nearby coffee shop." I decided to go along with my father-in-law's proposal because my mother-in-law would come back if I stayed here for a long time. When I entered the coffee shop and sat down, my father-in-law immediately asked me, "So why is Caroline, who should be overseas, here? What happened to Miles?" I hesitated whether to tell the truth. That's because if my father-in-law was also in league with my mother-in-law, my plan would be ruined. "Haven't you heard from my mother-in-law?" When I asked him that, my father-in-law tilted his head curiously and answered, "I haven't heard anything." From this reaction, I thought that my father-in-law really didn't know anything. So I decided to tell him everything about this matter. "Do you know about this plan?" I said, handing him a printout of the exchange between my husband and mother-in-law. My father-in-law looked very surprised when he saw the contents. "I can't believe it. I've seen the two of them talking secretly a few times, but I didn't think they were planning something like this." It seemed that my father-in-law didn't know after all. Yes. When I was over there, I overheard my husband talking to my mother-in-law on the phone and found out. So I got scared and came back home alone. "I'm sorry. My wife is really sorry. Please don't apologize. You did nothing wrong. So, about the future, I'm sorry to say this to you, but I want to divorce Miles." "Of course, it's your freedom, Caroline. I'm really sorry." Even though it was supposed to be a happy time for the newlyweds, so my father-in-law apologized many times. Until now, it seemed that my father-in-law had been avoiding me, so I thought he might hate me, but he said kind words to me, thinking about me. My father-in-law is such a good person, but I wonder why my mother-in-law and husband became such people. As I was thinking that, my father-in-law told me about this episode. Caroline, did my wife make you buy a brand name product? Well, yes. That might be my fault. It was around the time when my wife and I got married. I gave her a brand name bag for her birthday. Then she became obsessed with brand name products. Thanks to that, even at this age, she only wears brand name products. I want her to dress more appropriately for her age, but... I see. Sometimes she even borrowed money to buy them. I was angry at that time. I never thought that she would make Caroline buy them. I'm really sorry. I can't forgive what my mother-in-law did, but it's not your fault. The one who didn't quit even though my father-in-law got angry is the one who is at fault. That's right. By the way, how is Miles doing? Isn't it about time for him to come back according to the schedule? Well, that's... Oh no. Even my father-in-law would be angry if he knew that his son was trapped overseas. But if I've come this far, I have no choice but to tell him everything. Actually, I came back to America with Miles' passport. So Miles won't be back for a while. Huh? I'm sorry. I know it's not a good thing, but there was no other way to smoothly prepare for the divorce. I see. Well, it can't be helped since you're living with us. So that's what it was. Did something happen? No, it was probably the day you came back to America, Caroline. I heard Miles and my wife talking on the phone. According to my father-in-law, Miles was momentarily panicked by my absence, but he said that if he remained missing, the plan would go well. At that time, my father-in-law apparently had no idea what was going on, but he seemed to understand after hearing my story. I understand the situation. If Caroline is okay, I'll be on Caroline's side. Really? Thank you very much. While we were talking like this, my cell phone suddenly rang. It was Miles. He probably realized that he didn't have his passport at this time. I finally answered Miles' call. Hello? Caroline. Thank goodness. You finally answered the phone. Where are you now? I've been worried because I couldn't get in touch with you. But anyway, I'm glad you're safe. I'm sorry for worrying you. Actually, I got a call from my parents and I had to go back to America. I was so busy that I couldn't even contact you. I see. Well, that's okay, but do you know where my passport is? I'm supposed to go back today, but I can't find my passport. That's what happened, but I got confused and brought Miles' passport back with me because I was in a hurry to come back. What should I do then? Reissuing your passport should be possible there too, right? It's faster to reissue it than for me to send it to you now. Reissue. What about the company? I can't take any more time off. I'll call the company and explain it to them, so it's okay. I'll also tell my father-in-law and mother-in-law. I see. Okay. I'm sorry, that's all I can do. Be careful on your way back. I said that and hung up the phone. Caroline, you're quite a liar, aren't you? I'm good at using my bad ideas. In this way, my father-in-law became my ally. Thanks to him, I was able to prepare for the divorce more smoothly. And finally, the day arrived. My husband finished reissuing his passport and returned to America safely. My mother-in-law went to pick him up at the airport, so my husband and mother-in-law came home together. I'm home. Oh, it was really a disaster. Yeah, it's Caroline's fault. You have to communicate properly. Since hearing that I had returned to America before my husband, my mother-in-law has been saying sarcastic things to me, perhaps because she was frustrated that the plan had failed. Even though I'm the one who wants to say sarcastic things. Well, it doesn't matter. These two are going to hell from now on. When my husband and mother-in-law entered the house, my father-in-law led them to the living room with a stern expression. Come over here, both of you, he said, and guided them to the living room where I was waiting. Sit down. My husband and mother-in-law looked a little flustered, but they obediently sat down in the chair without defying my father-in-law's attitude. I'm sorry to bother you just as you've both come back. But there's something important I need to talk to you about. Something important. I'll get straight to the point. Miles, please divorce me. Divorce. Wait a minute. Caroline. What do you mean by suddenly saying that? You locked my son up in Italy and now you're saying you want a divorce as soon as he comes back. That's beyond unreasonable. Unreasonable? Aren't you the ones who are unreasonable? What do you mean? Well, don't you have any idea what I'm talking about? Then can you explain what this is? I showed them a photo of the exchange between my husband and mother-in-law. This is nonsense. You can make this kind of thing with editing nowadays, so it's not proof of anything. Well, that's true. It's weak as evidence with just this. But what about this? I took out a voice recorder and played the recorded audio. It was a conversation between my husband and mother-in-law on the phone. My father-in-law had recorded it. Since my mother-in-law is slightly hard of hearing, she always turns the speaker volume up to the maximum when talking to someone, so it was clearly audible. My father-in-law recorded it with that in mind. The conversation included the fact that I had returned safely to America and that the plan had failed, my mother-in-law's disappointed voice, and my husband's voice planning the next plan. You can't deny this, can you? Wait, Caroline. Please reconsider the divorce. I did it because my mother told me to. I really didn't want to do something like this. But my mother said she needed more money to buy her favorite brand name products. I wanted to see the look on my mother's face when she was happy. But now I've woken up. I don't want to divorce Caroline. Let's leave this house right now and live happily together? How about it? It's not too late to start now, is it? I was truly amazed at my husband's words. How could he come up with such an idea? Hey, I've been thinking this for a while, but you should stop Mama's boy. It's just plain creepy. It's good to have a sense of filial piety, but it's not normal to kill your wife for insurance money and buy what your parents like with it. Living with such a person from now on? Impossible. Just thinking about it gives me a headache. My husband seemed to have not expected to be told that much, and he hung his head in shame. Anyway, I'll definitely get a divorce. And I'll ask each of you to pay compensation. That's not all. I'll also ask my mother-in-law to pay back the money I paid for her to buy brand name products. What? Then I won't be able to buy brand name products anymore. It seems that she is still obsessed with brand name products even at this point. I'm really disgusted with this family. It's enough. Suddenly, my father-in-law interrupted. All you two have been doing is worrying about yourselves. Do you realize how scared Caroline was because of you? Is brand name merchandise so important to you that you would use someone else's money to buy it? Do you realize how much trouble Caroline was in? The two of them, who had not expected my father-in-law to get so angry, fell silent. Thanks to my father-in-law saying what I wanted to say, I felt a little better. But my revenge was not over yet. Wait, when did you find out about this? I found out on the first night of our honeymoon when I heard you talking to your mother on the phone in the middle of the night. So you went back to America the next morning. No way. You didn't tell the company about this, did you? Finally realized? Well, you'll find out the answer soon enough. As I said this, my husband's cell phone rang. It's from the company. You're kidding. With that, my husband nervously answered the phone. Hello? What fired? Wait a minute. That's a misunderstanding. It seemed that the call was cut off before my husband could make an excuse. By the way, I've submitted evidence of this matter to the company. My husband, who had lost both his wife and job, seemed to lose his strength at these words and collapsed on the floor. So I'll be contacting you through my lawyer from now on, so please don't get involved with me anymore. And so, my married life with my husband came to an end. But it didn't end with the divorce. The lawyer I had consulted about this matter told me. Even planning to kill someone is a crime, so you should go to the police. So I did as I was told and consulted the police. The two of them were not arrested, but they were fined. Thanks to their criminal record, my husband had a hard time finding a new job, and my mother-in-law started getting strange looks from the neighbors. Furthermore, to pay me alimony and other expenses, my mother-in-law had to sell almost all of the brand name items she had bought. The only thing left was a bag that my father-in-law had given my mother-in-law for her birthday. From now on, my father-in-law will be in charge of the family finances, and I heard that my mother-in-law will have less money to spend freely. This made the mother and son reflect on their actions. As for me, I am now living alone in an apartment in San Francisco. I got divorced right after getting married, but I didn't feel lonely or anything like that. Rather, I felt lucky to be free from that house. I don't want to live with anyone else again if I can help it. Of course, living alone is hard, but it's more comfortable because I don't have to worry about others. I no longer have to worry about money from my mother-in-law, so I have some extra money and am saving a little bit at a time. I hope to be happy with someone else someday.